Okay, I think we're live, so I'm going to say hello to everybody out there who's listening. This panel on fields describing emotions in books and how you bring emotion into your writing. So I'm going to start by, it's going to be readings. So I'm going to start by introducing each reader in turn, give their description, and they're going to read to you a scene showing emotion. Okay, and I'll start with Georgia, because you're at the top of the page I've got. So Georgia Beers. Georgia Beers and award-winning author Georgia Beers has written more than 40 novels of sapphic romance. She lives in upstate New York with her animals and is currently holed up in her warm house, probably under a blanket, but it's stupidly cold right now. She loves scary movies, has four small humans in her life who live two doors down and call her Gigi, and thinks her dog Archie is the sweetest creature on the planet. Her favourite things are a perfect cup of tea in the morning, leisurely walks with Archie, hugs from those four small humans, and the relaxing quiet of our home. Fall is her very favourite season. She's reading from her next book, Whisk Me Away, which will release in April and takes place at a baking retreat. She says the research was delicious. So it's over to you, Georgia.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. It looks like some of you are still coming in. I'm going to give you a little background on this scene that I'm going to read. Normally I would have my book, but because it comes out in April, I don't have my books yet. So I'm going to be reading off of paper, which I apologize for. I'm also hoping that my dog is quiet because I am not in my office. I'm in a different spot in my house. He can see out the window. If you hear him, I apologize. Just say hi. All right, so this story is about Reagan and Ava. They are bakers, they are pastry chefs. They have a history with each other from many years ago, and they are now at a very famous baking retreat run by world-renowned pastry chef Liza Bennett Schmidt. They are at the Bennett Schmidt retreat. It takes place in Rhinebeck, New York, in Liza's mansion, secluded up in the hills. There are six women that are taking place in this retreat, and Ava and Reagan have ended up as roommates because, of course, they have. They've had their very first day. They have just discovered or have just been told that Liza Bennett Schmidt is going to give 100 grand to her favorite baker at the end of the retreat, and they're all trying to absorb that. They were all together drinking and talking about it, and now Reagan and Ava have adjourned to their room for the night. They didn't speak at first, each retreating to her own side of the room. Reagan dug her pajamas out of the suitcase, kicking aside some of her clothes on the floor that were in her way. Mind if I use the bathroom first? Ava asked. Be my guest. The door of the bathroom clicked shut, and then the lock slid into place, and Reagan rolled her eyes. Does she think I'm going to bust in there while she's naked? Not that she'd hate seeing that, but still, that wasn't the point. She heard the shower running and realized she had some time, so she flopped onto her bed and grabbed her phone. Hey, loser, she typed. The bouncing dots were immediate, and soon Kiki typed back, how was day one? Reagan had let her friends know she'd arrived last night, but was too tired, her brain too packed full to carry on any kind of conversation beyond that. Crazy, insane, you won't believe it. Kiki sent a wide-eyed emoji, followed by, tell me. Reagan smiled. She could always count on Kiki to make her feel important. She typed, a list. Number 1, we made carrot cake today. Number 2, Liza liked mine third. 2 people ahead of me, 3 behind. Not great, but okay. Number 3, my roommate is Ava Prescott. She followed this with alternating grimacing emoji and wide-eyed emoji. Number 4, Liza is giving $100,000 to whichever of us impresses her most. Number 5, don't FaceTime me, because roommate. Then she sat back and waited, a knowing grin on her face. Kiki's first instinct was going to be to FaceTime her, but there was no way she'd have any kind of out loud conversation that Ava might possibly be able to hear. Shower or not, she had no idea how thin the walls were or how good Ava's hearing might be. And then her brain reminded her that Ava being in the shower meant she was naked. That sent her down an entirely different path for a moment. Thank God her phone buzzed in her hand and Kiki had sent about a zillion wide-eyed emoji, followed by, "The bitch who got you fired?" Followed by a gif of somebody falling out of her chair in disbelief. Reagan laughed and typed, "That very one." "Seriously," Kiki typed, "what are the odds?" "I know, right?" The dots bounced, stopped, bounced again, and Reagan noticed the shower had turned off just as Kiki's sweet message came through. "You gonna be okay?" She smiled, and not for the first time, she thanked her lucky stars for her friends. "Totally. Kinda awkward, but it'll be fine. I'm a professional, you know." Kiki sent back, "You are. Just let me know if you need somebody to come shove her off her high horse." Reagan grinned. "I'll keep it in mind." The bathroom door opened then, so she sent a good night and set her phone down. "All yours," Ava said was that a tiny smile? "Cool." Reagan grabbed her stuff and scurried into the bathroom. Ava rubbed the towel against her damp hair as she watched Reagan close the bathroom door behind her. She blew out a breath, only then realizing the underlying stress of sharing a room with somebody she had had fired. Several years ago or not, warranted or not, it was still ultra uncomfortable to share space with somebody who didn't like her. It was really only because of the day's whirlwind of work and unexpected information that she'd been able to set it all aside and focus on why she was there. "That's what I need to keep doing," she said to herself as she rubbed lotion into her legs, "remembering why I'm here. I earned this spot. I deserve to be here." And apparently, so did Reagan. While she found that hard to believe, she had to admit that it was possible for people to grow and change and learn. And it had been years since they'd worked together, and Liza Bennett Schmidt was a well-known stickler for competence and creativity. She'd have never accepted Reagan if she didn't have what it took. Bit of a hard pill for Ava to swallow, but there it was. With a sigh, she plugged in her blow dryer and sat at the desk, which she'd arranged as a vanity instead, as there was a mirror on the wall above it. She was almost finished drying her hair when Reagan exited the bathroom. Ava's back was to her, but she could see her in the reflection, boxer shorts leaving a lot of leg that Ava had to force herself not to stare at. It would certainly be helpful if Reagan wasn't a woman who was fun to look at. Hair dry, she unplugged her dryer and wrapped the cord around it and then set it to one side. She moisturized her face, then arranged all her toiletries in a neat row before she stood up and pushed the chair in. Reagan was already under the covers, and Ava could feel her eyes on her. When she glanced over, Reagan gave her a small smile. "Hey, congratulations on your carrot cake. It was really good." Ava's shock must have been visible because Reagan snorted a laugh and rolled her eyes. "Don't look so surprised." Then she turned off the bedside lamp and rolled over, and that was the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, and lots of the moderators get in-depth questions to ask, but I'm going to cheat and ask you all the same question after you finish your reading. So the question is, what is it about the emotions in this scene that made you pick it for your reading?
Well, I mean, it's hard to choose a reading from your latest book to fit a particular, here's what you need to read about. But I picked this one because these two women are grappling with the excitement of being at this retreat, the shock of being rooming with each other, of being forced to be roommates, the memories of their history and why they don't like each other and what happened, and the idea that they have to spend 8 weeks with each other as roommates. Ava was late to the retreat, so it's not like she can ask for a different roommate. And there are only 6 of them. There are 2 in each room. So they don't want to rock any boats. So there's a lot going on. Then you throw into that the fact that they are both physically attracted to each other, but also don't like each other. So there's that whole grappling going on. So there's quite a plateful for these two.
Thank you. Okay, so next, Gunn Brooke. Gunn Brooke writes romance and science fiction and is working on her 35th novel. Living in the countryside, she enjoys spending time with her family and her dogs. And when she doesn't write, she loves to paint using acrylics and also to dive into all kinds of crafts. Gunn's downtime consists of reading, listening to music, and watching her favourite shows and movies. A homebody at heart, Gunn enjoys curled up under a blanket in her recliner in the winter, and residing on her deck in the summer, surrounded by family, friends, and dogs. She's going to be reading from Scarlet Love.
This is it. I'm not sure if it's mirrored or not,
That's it.
but there, maybe less shiny. Yes. So this is a romance, and it takes place in a town I made up in Vermont called Mason. And there resides Felicien, who was born in Canada but was adopted by her aunt after her parents died. And her aunt was very emotionally distant. So she's become quite the recluse. And then one night, late, there's a knock on the door, and there is Puck and her dog Noodle, who is a German Shepherd. Their camper van has broken down, and she reluctantly lets them in. And it turns out the camper van, it'll take weeks and weeks to fix it. And the deal they make is that since a Puck is a photographer and a vlogger, she's going to help photograph uh, Felician's work with her flowers because she's a avid horticulturist, quite famous in her field, and there's going to be a book. And this scene is from when they're in the greenhouse and having made a fantastic discovery. Hey, look at that. Puck snapped several photos, but then motioned for Felicien to join her. The path between the raised flower bed and the wall was narrow, but Puck remained in place despite it being crowded, not about to miss the moment when Felicien laid eyes on what she'd just seen. What? Something wrong? Concern on her face and in her voice, Felicien pushed her way in to stand next to Puck. There, just next to the one that looked like it's going to be apricot colored. See that? Puck smiled so broadly now, her cheeks hurt. No, I don't. Felicien leaned further in. What are you talking about? And then she saw it. Puck raised her camera, this time settling for using the view screen to make sure Felicien was in the frame when she nearly climbed into the flower bed, one arm stretched out before her. She knew exactly what Felicien was reaching for. If the bud from earlier had made Felicien tear up, the one that had opened up enough to show several petals risked making her actually cry. Felicien didn't cry. She was so silent, Puck was sure she wasn't even breathing. Felicien barely touched the half-open bud. She didn't have to. The light from the small window panes shone down on the peony as if it were helping present it to the world. Her thoughts rarely became dramatic, but she could no other way to look at it. Here in the oldest greenhouse, where she'd spent so much time, so much of her life, she was staring at a miracle. A unique peony, created after so many years of learning her craft, had unfolded and showed its first petals. Felicien couldn't speak for several moments until she managed to clear her voice. It's almost ironic, she murmured, her voice still thick. I worked alongside Aunt Colette in here from the time I was 7, 8 years old. We had nothing more in common, my aunt and I, than our love for growing flowers. She was more into roses and orchids, and I still carry some of that. But for me, it's all about the peonies. She thought of them as plebeian, a kind of a perennial, but I didn't care. She allowed some space for me, and I was grateful. I finally felt as if I was doing something right. Puck had lowered her camera. Felicien hadn't even noticed her using it until she saw her and simply listened. Felicien motioned around the greenhouse. This was her sanctuary, and despite my resentment against her on so many occasions, it has become mine. Ironic, isn't it? She waited for Puck to say something, but she merely waited for Felicien to continue. When I went to college, not far, but far enough to have to stay in a dorm, she made it clear that I didn't need to return home on weekends. I did get to come back for the holidays, though. She laughed, but it sounded but the sound became choked. She wasn't the type to shed tears, but here she was, emotional over a flower, and long days passed. If you think I chose a horticulturist program just so I would be able to come home after college, you wouldn't be entirely wrong. Oh, Felician. Puck stood and pulled her to her feet. Tugging her close, she hugged her, but didn't offer any platitudes, thank God, or pity. That story, Felician turned her head while still in Puck's embrace and looked at the peony. Scarlet Love. Excuse me? Puck shifted and met her gaze. This hybrid, the name, Scarlet Love. Puck's expression became softer. That's a beautiful name. What made you think of it? To Felician's dismay, her cheeks warmed. The color, obviously, and that you were here. I mean, I had someone to share this discovery with. She took a few steps back, uncomfortable at the way the hug made her feel. You can't admit means to me, Puck said. She had placed her camera on the edge of the raised bed and now shoved her hands into her pockets. Only now did Felician realize that she wasn't the only one taken aback by the onslaught of emotions. She found the response puzzling at first, since she knew Puck found her flowers beautiful, but she didn't have Felician's obsession with them. Then she recalled her own unusual display of emotion, how intensely Puck had seemed to share the experience of the discovery. It hadn't seemed to be all about professionalism and seizing the moment. The way Puck had held her, been there with her, for her, spoke of something else, something a lot more personal. Thank you.
And thank you. And so again, the question, what was it about the emotions in this scene that made you pick it for your reading?
Well, I agree with Georgia. It wasn't easy to pick one that had sort of like uh, because there is of course emotion all over the book, but this was the one where I think it's a pivotal moment also in the book in a way, and it's the first time that Felician really shares anything of her past and lets Puck in and shares what's the most important to her, and also how hinting at how bad it was with her aunt from time to time. So for me, it was very emotional to write. So perhaps that has something to do with why I picked it as well.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so next I have Christine Kepler. Christine is married and lives with her family in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. A lifelong sci-fi and film nerd, she spends most of her free time chauffeuring her two sons to their many sports obligations and finding time to write. She enjoys video games, concerts, and cheering on the Virginia Tech Hokies. Hokies? If only she could find time to sleep. She's going to be reading from Worth Waiting For, which is a follow-on from her previous book, One Last Summer.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I am going to read the prologue because why not? And the only thing you need to know about this is the main character, Peyton, is on her way to a mandatory staff meeting. Anyway, okay, here we go. Juggling 2 cups of coffee, I squeeze through one of the top rows to get to my best work buddy, Mal. She has her bag on one of the chairs beside her, saving me a seat, and I'm thankful because the auditorium is already packed. I'm normally much more punctual than this. I take my job here seriously, but the long weekend was just so perfect that it made it hard to get out of bed this morning. That and the attractive blonde who spent the night and insisted I come back to bed for a few more minutes after my morning shower. Mal slouched in her seat, with her head back against the seat rest, arms crossed and eyes closed. Grinning, I kick her foot to wake her. Happy tourist season, I say, way chippier than I feel. Ugh, don't remind me. Oh, coffee. She perks up when I thrust the cup at her and she snags her stuff so I can fall into the chair beside her. She takes a long sip and sighs. I think I love you. I know. I check my watch. It's 2 minutes after 8. We normally give the stragglers 5 extra minutes, so I sit back and wait, impressed that I somehow made it on time.
Nice hickey, she says, and I pull up my collar to cover it. Mal cracks open the coffee lid to release the steam. Anyone I know? No, I tell her, thinking about the blonde who was only here for a long holiday weekend with her friends. What about you? What did you do over Memorial Day? Barbecue with the parentals and lazy time with the boyfriend. Michael, our Vice President of Human Resources and Administration, steps up to the podium that sits a little off center of the room and clears his throat, then taps the mic to make sure it's on. Think anything interesting will happen? Mal asks in a loud whisper. We could only be so lucky, I mumble, as Michael starts his good morning, happy you could all join us speech. When we finally get to the point of introductions, I glance at the row of people lined up in the front. There are a few scattered teenagers, a few seniors looking for temp work, and then my stomach completely bottoms out. We're pleased to welcome our newest Marine vet resident, Hannah Choi. Hannah's gaze meets mine from across the auditorium, and I'm so startled seeing the familiar pair of eyes that I spill coffee all over my legs. It's so hot that it burns through my jeans, and I almost fall out of my seat, hissing out a string of whispered profanities. Whoa, Mel reaches out as if to steady me. Once I've sort of recovered, I ignore the curious and annoyed glances, my attention back on Hannah. But she's focused on Michael, introducing the rest of the new staff. She looks almost exactly the same, except older, curvier. Her hair is a little longer and her face a little thinned out, but somehow she's even more beautiful than I remember. My heart beats as if it's trying to burst through my chest just to get to her on the other side of the room. Apparently, it doesn't remember that she shattered it into a million pieces, then ghosted me for the better part of a decade. It's like I'm suffering from sleep paralysis, terrified and unable to move or speak. Hell, I'm barely able to breathe, except I know I'm awake thanks to the scalding hot coffee that's still burning my legs. Okay, I'm not terrified, at least not totally. I'm surprised and nervous and anxious and slightly panicky because what the actual fuck is happening? It's hot in here. Too hot. Mal takes my cup and I use my free hand to pull at the collar of my polo. Maybe this is a dream or something out of a twisted ass nightmare because there is no way this is real. Then it's like my heart remembers what happened and there's a pain in my chest so sharp that I'm not sure if I'm going to cry or puke. It's like I can feel the miles of walls I built around my heart and the dozen of boxes where I kept my memories safely locked away start to crumble. Images and feelings that I tried so damn hard to forget flash inside my mind in rapid succession. Sharing a melted ice cream cone on a hot summer day, leaning against lockers and stealing kisses between classes, wrapped under a warm blanket, sipping hot chocolate, bare feet running up my calf, warm brown eyes that looked thick like honey staring at me in the sunlight that peeks through my bedroom curtains. I squeeze my eyes shut and try to forget, to shove the memories back inside their boxes. No, I'm definitely going to puke. Mal puts her hand on my arm, and the simple touch pulls me back to reality. You okay? You're pale as shit. You're not going to spew, are you? I shake my head no, but I'm not entirely convinced that's true. You look like you've seen a ghost. Wait, do you know the new resident? My throat is dry. I chug what's left of my coffee, ignoring the way it burns going down. I used to. Bad hookup? I shake my head no. Hannah was never bad at anything, and she certainly wasn't a hookup. She was my high school girlfriend. I almost choke on the word was. You had a girlfriend? Mal says, just a little bit too loud. Shh, someone hisses from behind. You shh, Mal fires back. Can't you see she's in the middle of a crisis? She turns back to me and places her hand on my arm. Bad breakup? Devastating. It doesn't matter, I mumble. When I risk another glance, Hannah is staring at me with an indiscernible look. It unsettles me that I can't decipher it. I remember when I used to be fluent in every single one of her expressions, but this is new. A reminder that we haven't seen each other for almost 9 years, that we're nothing more than strangers who just happen to share a lifetime of memories. That thought alone is enough to bring back the sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. Seriously, are you okay? Mal whispers. I'm fine. Except I'm not fine at all, because Hannah Choi, the goddamn love of my life, has moved back to Birdneck and completely thrown my world off its axis. What's worse is that she doesn't appear to be anywhere near as panicky as I am. Like the memories of us and all that happened don't flood her with a sense of nostalgia, love, and heartache all rolled into one. And if she's genuinely this nonplussed, it's pretty clear she's been able to move on in a way that I've never been able to. It's all I can do not to burst into tears in front of the entire freaking staff. That's
Yeah, okay.
it.
Thank you. I'm just also going to add that in the middle of that, I lost the internet briefly and Zoom crashed, but I seem to be back. But if I go again, just help
It
among
happens.
yourselves. Okay, so Christine, what was it about the emotions in that? that section that made you pick it as a reading?
Mainly because I picked the prologue because I didn't have to do a lot of backstory because it's the very start of the book. Joking aside, I thought that it would be interesting to showcase a timeline of emotions crammed into like a few seconds of Peyton's life. So she sees someone that she was completely in love with, who broke her heart, left. She hasn't seen, talked to, or heard from in 9 years, and then all of a sudden she's there where she works and about to work with her, become her coworker. And just seeing her, she goes through the entire timeline of events of their first, the first time they saw each other, the first time they met, when they fell in love, the relationship, the heartache, the separation, and it all just hit her at once. And I thought that might be a fun little part to read. So,
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So next, yes, I've got Nan Sparks. Nan Sparks' books span several genres, from romance to thrillers to murder mysteries. She lives in central South Wisconsin with her spouse. Her passion for photography, homesteading, hiking, gardening, and almost anything outdoors comes through in her novels. She's going to be reading from Waterlogged, a North Wolds mystery. So, Nan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nancy Sparks, and I'm going to be reading from Waterlogged, a Northwoods mystery. And fun fact, this is my wife's hand, so on the cover. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Hannah. This is from chapter 2, and this is Hannah's first introduction to the reader. One minute, Hannah had been teaching a course on harvesting beneficial herbs for tinctures at a co-op in southern Missouri. Then the next, she was pushing the limits of her vintage 1973 Winnebago. She wasn't even sure she'd said goodbye to anyone. A short phone call from Aunt Ruthie 13 hours earlier had her driving nonstop. Aunt Dottie had cancer. Stage 3. They needed her help. Hannah's camper hadn't been running all that well when she'd left Branson, but somehow it had survived the journey to the northeastern corner of Wisconsin, clunking, clattering, and coughing out plumes of dark smoke those last 20 miles. Pulling into the all-too-familiar driveway, Hannah parked off to the side just in case the old Winnebago refused to ever start again. She gripped the wheel tightly, drew in a deep breath, and let it out slowly, unsure of what the future would hold. Stage 3. Stage 3 was bad. Not the worst, but close. Had Dottie elected treatment? Or would she refuse and simply enjoy her remaining days? That last part was too much to think about. Through the open driver's window, Hannah heard the rusty spring screech in protest as the screen door on the house opened, then that reminiscent thud as the door was released and slammed shut. It was surprising how a simple sound could conjure such a rush of fond memories and heartwarming emotions. Her 2.5 years with her aunts had been a life-changing experience. Ah, there's my favorite niece. Pulled back to the present, Hannah opened her eyes. Her aunt's voice was unmistakable, but the person standing at the top of the steps looked nothing like dear Aunt Dottie. For some reason, Hannah thought she'd only recently been diagnosed, but clearly she'd misunderstood. One thing was certain: cancer sucked. Aunt Dottie had dropped at least 20 pounds. Her once snugly fitting clothes now swayed with the gentle breeze. The knit cap pulled over her ears was likely not only keeping her head warm, but also hiding the fact that she'd lost her beautiful ginger locks. Her face looked different too, void of both eyebrows and lashes. Hannah hadn't realized how a few fine hairs could create such defining features. Without them, Dottie's striking green eyes had morphed into sunken orbs, peering out of dark, cavernous sockets. Hannah kept up her end of the favorite niece game. Favorite doesn't count when I'm your only niece. Aunt Dottie balanced herself with an aluminum walker. Her bony knuckles were white with the effort. Hannah tried to fight back tears while wrestling with the camper's driver's door. A strong shoulder shove proved successful, and she jumped to the ground the moment it released. Aye, doesn't mean you're not my favorite. Aunt Dottie's response was exactly as it had always been. Hannah rushed around the front of the Winnebago, ran up the porch steps, and wrapped her arms around her most treasured person in all the world. Oh, Aunt Dottie, I've missed you so much. She inhaled deeply, craving all the smells that she associated with her aunt. But they were oddly absent. The unique scents of her fabric softener, shampoo, and conditioner were missing, as was the faint, sweet fragrance of her perfume. Now she smelled like nothing, almost sterile, lacking all familiarity. It didn't matter as long as Hannah could hold her close. Oh, careful, honey, don't squeeze so hard. You might pop my head clean off. I'm not as sturdy as I once was. Dottie's voice was a squeak. The mental cartoon image of her head popping off forced Hannah to stifle laughter through her tears. She'd always been one to laugh when she cried, often at the most inappropriate times. She loosened her grip. Shit, so sorry. Cancer sucks balls. Oh, you can say that again. Cancer sucks! At least Aunt Dottie said it with her this time. Dottie, how are you feeling? I'd be lying if I said I hadn't felt better. Your Aunt Ruthie's doing her best to keep up around here, get me to my appointments, and keep the diner open. It's been tough on her, too. Yeah, she said her hands were full, but I had no idea it was that you were already getting treatments. When were you diagnosed? A few months ago. Well, I wish I'd known. I could have been here to help sooner. Cancer's a lot without a business to run. But Ruthie has a diner, and Jesus. Aunt Dottie, I didn't know you were. She couldn't stop the tears. Oh, honey, stop. We decided against telling you right away. There wasn't much to do at first, and you need to be able to live your best life. Besides, seeing you mope around wouldn't do much to boost my spirit. We called you home when it was clear we needed help, and here you are, such a ray of sunshine. Dottie reached for her again and held her close for a long moment. When she pulled away, Hannah realized she'd been crying too. Look at me, carrying on like an old ninny. We just called you yesterday, and it seems you've been on the road nonstop to get here. Come inside. I'm sorry we haven't cleaned your room. I'm not even sure if there are sheets on your bed. Any more, just breathing wears me out. Don't worry about it. I can take care of my room. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above her head, and Hannah caught a whiff of another one of her favorite scents. She drew in a deep breath through her nose and looked up at the sky. It smells like rain. Storm's coming. It's supposed to be a gully washer. It's headed this way at a pretty good clip. The good news is, if it comes in fast, it'll be gone just as fast. If it's the one I drove through on my way up, it'll clean out the gutters, that's for sure. Come on, let's get you inside. Hannah followed her into the house. The end. You'll have to read the book to see how it all turns out.
Okay, thank you. And again, the question, what's it about the emotions in this scene that made you pick it for your reading?
Well, cancer sucks. It was such a pivotal way to introduce Hannah. It was a way to bring her home. It was a way to have her invested in staying in the area and meeting the other characters. So it really played an integral role in setting the stage for the rest of the story, as well as offering me a way to really dig into the backstory of Hannah as a character. So that was a reason behind choosing that scene.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and finally, in alphabetical order, Julie Underwood.
All right.
Julia Underwood lives on the west coast and loves the fact that she can swim morning laps in an outdoor pool year round. She's retired and grateful to have more time for family, friends, and writing, reading, and art projects. She has a degree in veterinary medicine and believes every love story deserves an animal sidekick and a happy ending. She is going to be reading from The Mogul Meets Her Match. Away.
Okay. So The Mogul Meets Her Match is my third book, and it's a contemporary romance that features an Ice Queen CEO and an engaging chef who finally owns her dream cafe. Lotus Enterprises' next big project requires owning an entire city block, but one last property owner refuses to sell. Determined to acquire the property, Lotus's CEO, who attributes her climb from poverty and her enormous success to her business rules, has spent time undercover to learn more about the holdout, and now she's grappling with unwelcome feelings for the cafe owner. Hell no! Claire would certainly prevent herself from saying it out loud. Even she was tired of the vocalization of her angst that kept spilling out like an involuntary reflex she couldn't control. But she couldn't prevent herself from thinking it, and this time it was self-inflicted. She set her pen down and tapped her fingers on her desk. She didn't feel any better than she had yesterday when she'd climbed into her car and driven away from Abby's little periwinkle house. Periwinkle. Who painted their house periwinkle? Abriella Pita, that's who. The same Abriella Pita she'd kissed, enjoyed kissing, wanted to kiss again. It had come so naturally, but there was no way she could justify the kiss's business.
She'd crossed a line, and that wasn't even considering the pain she could cause the heart she'd learned to protect. That kiss was shackled to unwelcome feelings that were trying to nest in a heart that was so much better off without them. Hell no. She did say it out loud to H2 as the tarantula appeared at the front of the terrarium. He wouldn't judge her. You must have had quite a weekend. Nate appeared and leaned into his signature relaxed pose against her office door frame. Claire looked at her second in command and scowled. She needed to proceed like nothing had happened. She had a business to run, a job to do. That good, huh? And it's only Monday morning. How's your undercover gig going? Nate inquired. I have no desire to discuss it. Claire shoved a pile of papers across her desk. Okay, but at least tell me one thing. Did you see her this weekend? Who? Claire asked, knowing exactly who he meant. Abriella Pita, who else? Nate blew a raspberry and studied her. Something has you all worked up. Did you see her? Claire pinned Nate with a fierce look and thought about what she was willing to reveal. She had an absurd impulse to just spill it all to her childhood friend. She hadn't had these kinds of feelings before. All of the turmoil that was filling her head, rumbling around in her chest, teasing her down low. But Nate wouldn't have answers and would only learn things that would make her appear weak. Placing her heart in a position of vulnerability was bad enough, but it was so much worse. She'd done it in a way that interfered with business. This wasn't who she was. I did, she muttered. So you spent some time with her. It's okay to like her. Claire contemplated giving him one of her practice beware the bitch looks, the look that petrified almost everyone except Nate. It would be wasted on him. Don't try to define it, Nate. It's business. I don't want to hurt her. Business has always come first, before everything else, including my personal life. Adhering to that has been key to success, and she stopped, having said enough. And Nate waited. Claire groaned. If it was anyone but Nate, she'd throw them out of her office without a second thought. Fire them. She was in the mood to fire someone. I kissed her. Abby actually returned her kiss, but I initiated the encounter. That's not sticking to business, and if it gets out, a chance of tabloid fodder. What a major screw up. Nate smiled and didn't pass judgment except for a bit of teasing. Yeah, feelings, messing with business, a fireable offense. So are you going to see her again? Claire glared at him. I need a reset. You can't take a kiss back, but she was talking more to herself than Nate. I've warned her that business came first with me. I told her things are complicated. I never lied and even told her that a mission was part of business. Claire was already feeling better, talking herself through the issues. Who am I if Lotus Enterprises doesn't come first? I'd be a hypocrite. I've spent my entire adult life getting to this spot. If my actions could interfere with an essential IT consolidation project, then no more personal engagement. Nate nodded, not as though he agreed, but more as if he was acknowledging that she'd clarified her position. So don't kiss her. It doesn't mean you can't see her in the name of business. Claire shook her head. I need to step back from all of it, including Abby Pita. Turn this back over to acquisitions. I'd agree you need to let them officially handle this, but don't slam the door on Abby. There's no law against you wanting a veggie burger and continuing to scope out a business interest. Nate looked at Claire the way he did when he had a hidden agenda. Put it on your expense tab, a business veggie burger. Claire considered further and then breathed a sigh of relief for the moment. Not at what Nate had advised, but at her newfound resolve. She had a plan. She'd back off and return it to acquisitions. She needed to stop whatever she felt for Abby. She couldn't do personal and professional. Claire felt better, once again in charge of things. Her priorities clarified. Rule number one, business always comes first. Now if she could just ignore her feelings and fucking unkiss the woman.
Good. Good, thank you. And the final question again. What was it about the emotions in this scene that made you pick it as a reading?
Okay, I just a little background and then I'll answer that. So in the Mogul Meets match, I was drawn to the challenge of exploring the complex and evolving emotions of an ice cream archetype who has never been in love and has no place in love in her life for falling in love. And I paired her with a warm, mature woman, Abby, who is no pushover and is as devoted to her little cafe she owns as Claire is to her huge business empire that's moved her past her early poverty and her loveless childhood. So in the book, Claire's determined to acquire Abby's cafe property for an IT consolidation project when Abby has no intention of selling. And Claire's growing feelings for Abby break the successful business rules that Claire's lived by for her entire adult life, as well as imperiling her damaged heart. So I chose this scene to read because I thought it portrayed the mounting emotional conflict that Claire grapples with as her attraction to Abby grows. And the scene offers an initial look at Claire's journey toward thawing, because even if Claire's trying to reject her feelings for Abby, she's acknowledged they exist, which is notable. This scene portrays not only Claire's turmoil, but that turmoil hints that she has the potential for emotional growth.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for some awesome reading from everyone. And okay, now we go to general questions and answers. And we've actually got one from the audience straight off. So I'm going to go with that to start with. This is from Anne Hart, and it's what impact does writing a complex emotional scene have on you? And if so, how do you maintain your own emotional balance? So, does anyone want to start with that? Or should I just pick on somebody? I'm going to pick on Christine because you're sitting directly below me on my screen.
Cool. I, I think writing emotional scenes, if it's complex, I don't know about anybody else, but if it's something that's really heavy, I save it for last, and I have to kind of be in a quiet space, because if I'm writing something that's heavy with emotion, I think you need to actually be in that moment, and the only way to be in that moment is to actually pretend you're that person in that moment. So if there's like somebody dies or something, then you have to channel, oh my gosh, what does that feel like if this person that I love dies? And it's very heavy. And if my kids bust, no, 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 I'm writing something very serious. Please get help. I need to stay in this headspace. Um, uh, so I think I try to separate myself from the real world when I write something that's pretty heavy or complex, so I don't get distracted and I can stay in that moment.
Okay,
I would agree. I think you have to mute everything.
okay, Nat, since you want to go next, okay, so you want to answer the
Oh,
question.
I was just going with Kristen. I say I would agree. I think you have to mute the world and just dive into that scene and feel the feels. I mean, it's hard to write about stuff that, it's hard to write about stuff that is fictional, but we draw in enough real world experience that we've all felt a little bit of those feelings. And you can't unkiss somebody, which I love that line. That is just awesome. But yeah, I think you just have to separate the world and feel it and experience it and just roll with it.
Georgia, anything to add?
I would agree with that. I also feel like it's a good way for me to know if the scene is going to work
Mhm.
if I am feeling it. If it's making me tear up, or I have to stop and take a breath, or I need to step away for a minute, then I know it's working. If that's not happening to me, then I don't think it's going to happen to my readers. And so I think I have to revisit how I'm approaching it. Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah.
Gun? Anything?
I agree with what everyone else said. And the one thing that I do, since I do live in a very small house and there are dogs and there is a sun, and what I do is I put on my approved playlist on Spotify and just go into myself, and um, I definitely need to sequester and be on my own for
Mhm.
sure.
Okay, and finally, Julia.
Yeah, and there's not much left to say. I channel it too, and as Georgia said, I have to feel it myself, or the reader's not going to feel it. And so once I've written it, I go back and read it a couple of times and make sure that I'm feeling it too.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, kind of probably for the pantsers, but do your characters ever surprise you by reacting to an event in a way you didn't expect or want them to? And if so, how do you deal with it? And I should ask that. Georgia.
I am not a pantser, so my
I was
characters
gonna
I
don't
was
do
waiting for that.
anything that I don't want them to do.
I was waiting for that.
Once in a while, I can be doing a scene and think to myself, maybe it should go this way instead. But yeah, they don't drive the bus. I do.
Good job. Gun.
I will start out with a little bit of an outline. I'm the biggest pantser you ever met in your that's my, oh, at least in Sweden. So my character characters tend to run away with me, and I'm fully expecting to one day hear from Bold Strokes, and they're going to say, "This is not the book you sent the proposal for."
So funny.
Well, hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. So.
Earmuffs, Sandy, earmuffs.
What's funny because I put a byline on all of my proposals, and I say on the byline, "Subject to character's whim," because the characters
Can I
will do
do
what they
that
want.
too and just say
I've had to
Nick's
change a
byline?
blurb. Yep, I've had to change a blurb because the characters went off in a totally different direction, and it was no longer an opposites attract.
Oh, having to change a blurb is the worst.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Julia, got anything?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've had that happen because, well, I don't usually have all the events in a book defined before I start writing. I've thought out my main characters in terms of their personality, backstory, current needs and wants, and also what their emotional journey will be as they head toward their happily ever after. So I apply who I know my character to be to the events as they occur, and that's worked pretty well for me.
Planner.
Kristen, did I haven't gone to you yet on this? I don't think.
I just kind of go like I'm not as fine-tuned in as Georgia. We can't all be Georgia beers here. But I have an idea of what I want, and then some like halfway through it'll change, and I'm like, all right, we're going this way. And you should talk to my co-author for our first three books. She'd be like, Kristen, you're starting in Virginia. You know you want to get to California, but which road are we
How do we
taking?
get to Montana?
I'm like, yeah, that exit looks good. Let's try that. I just gotta go with it.
Doing that, if you copyrighted that byline.
Copyrights. We have so many copyrights to file today, guys.
Okay. Okay, can anyone share an example of a character whose emotional journey was particularly challenging to write? Nance.
I'll go. Go. There you
Oh
go,
no.
Julia.
Okay, Julia. She put her hand up. There you go. Volunteer.
Okay, yeah. Well, in my second novel, Dancing with Dahlia, Dal's a veterinarian with multiple clinics and a rescue nonprofit, as well as a 5-year-old daughter. And both her childhood and a difficult marriage have left her damaged and risk averse to romance. So Dal's emotional journey involved an epiphany. And so writing her internal struggle and the interwoven supporting events was fun, but challenging because an epiphany has to fit into the story in a way that makes it credible. So that was a big challenge. And as a fun note, that epiphany came from a rescue dog named Fred.
Aw.
Anyway, Nance, do you want to?
Well, my
I guess-
debut novel, Cowgirl, involved a woman who was a child, foster home child who came up through the system, and that was a difficult character to write. There was a lot of research to do and a lot of emotional journeys through what put her in foster care, all the stuff she dealt with while in foster care. So there was a whole gamut of emotional stuff with that debut novel. So that was a tough one.
Actually, realize the time's whizzing by so quick. Georgia, anything to put in? There we are.
I guess if I needed to pick something, it's tough, but I think I would go with 96 Hours and just writing these two people falling in love around 9/11. So having to deal with falling in love and also the guilt of finding this happy thing amongst this tragedy, amidst this tragedy was a interesting line to toe.
Okay, Kristen?
I would say that when I was writing Worth Waiting For, it was a little hard because the entire book is told from Peyton's perspective and trying to like showcase Hannah and what she was going through on her side without actually getting inside of her head. And then because it's through Peyton's point of view, you only see what Peyton sees and what Peyton knows, but you have to kind of drop these hints that Peyton will miss, but that the readers will catch, but that's not really like, so that was kind of challenging because I had feedback that said, Peyton, I like Hannah because Peyton likes Hannah, but I don't know why I like Hannah other than that. And I was like, well, crap. Now I got to go back and try and fix that. But that was really good feedback, but that was a little complicated.
Writing first person is tough for that purpose, for that reason alone.
It is.
Done? You've got about 30 seconds, I think.
I would say the book So Unique had a character, and one of the main characters was neurodivergent and what they used to call Asperger's. And since I couldn't write from her perspective, because she wasn't always able to put words to her feelings, it's the only book, also first book I wrote in the first person from the other character's perspective. And we got to meet the girl through her in many ways. So it was a lot of research, and it was a lot of talking to friends and
Okay.
getting to know my character through that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We're up on time, so it's been an awesome panel. And thank you all for your input.
Well,
And I'm
thank you,
guessing
everyone. It was wonderful.
Thank
Everybody.
you, Jane.